Have you ever wondered why, despite working harder than your parents did, you feel like you're falling further behind? You follow the rules, you save money, you pay your taxes, yet the goalposts for financial freedom seem to move further away every single year. We are told that governments exist to protect our property and ensure economic stability. They speak of growth, opportunity, and social safety nets. But what if I told you that for thousands of years, the very institutions claiming to protect your wealth have actually been designing sophisticated systems to drain it? If you peel back the layers of history, you find a pattern that is as old as civilization itself. It is a story of deception, where governments use complex financial tricks to transfer purchasing power from the pockets of the working class into the vaults of the elite. These aren't accidents, they are features of the system. Today, we are going to walk through the history of this financial sleight of hand. We will uncover how the tricks used by ancient emperors are the exact same ones draining your bank account right now, just wrapped in modern suits and banking jargon. Once you see it, you can never unsee it. Chapter 1. The Silent Theft of Inflation. Let's travel back to the height of the Roman Empire. This was the civilization that built roads, aqueducts, and laws that still influence us today. But Rome also invented the blueprint for destroying a currency. In the 3rd century, the empire was overextended. The emperors needed massive amounts of money to pay the legions and fund their lavish lifestyles. Raising taxes was risky. It caused riots and rebellions. So, they chose the silent option. They began to tamper with the denarius, the silver coin that was the backbone of the Roman economy. Under Emperor Septimius Severus and his successors, the mints began secretly mixing copper into the silver. At first, it was subtle, just a few percent, but over decades, the silver content crashed. By the time of Emperor Gallienus, the silver coin was 95% copper with a thin silver wash on the outside to fool the public. But the market wasn't fooled. Merchants realized the coins were worthless junk. Prices skyrocketed. A measure of wheat that cost a few denarii suddenly cost hundreds. The citizens of Rome saw their savings evaporate. They hadn't spent their money. The value of their money had been stolen from them while it sat in their pockets. This was the first great lesson in inflation. It is a hidden tax. When a government prints money or debases coins, they are stealing value from everyone else who holds that currency. Rome collapsed in part because they destroyed the very medium of exchange that held their society together. And if you think we've evolved past this, look at the purchasing power of the dollar or the pound over the last century. The metal has changed to paper and digital digits, but the trick remains exactly the same. As we moved into the Middle Ages and the Renaissance, kings and queens needed a new way to extract wealth without causing an uprising. The forced loan became the weapon of choice. Imagine being a successful merchant in medieval London or Paris. You've worked for decades to build your guild. Suddenly, a royal decree arrives. The king is going to war, or perhaps he needs to build a new palace. He requests a loan, but we all know that a request from a king is a demand. If you refuse, you face imprisonment, fines, or the seizure of your property. So you hand over your gold. In return, you get a promise, a piece of paper saying you will be paid back with interest. But history shows these promises were rarely kept. The crown would often default, or if they did pay you back, it was years late and paid in a currency that had already been devalued. This was coercion disguised as patriotism. It established a dangerous precedent that the private capital of citizens is ultimately a piggy bank for the state, to raid whenever it mismanages its own finances. The terminology has changed today. We call it capital controls or windfall taxes, but the core mechanic is identical. The state claims a moral right to your assets whenever they find themselves in a bind. The game changed forever in 1694. This is a date that should be taught in every school, but rarely is. Britain was exhausted from wars with France, and the king's credit was ruined. No one would lend him money anymore. A group of wealthy bankers approached the government with a revolutionary idea. They would form a private corporation, the Bank of England, and lend the king the gold he needed. In exchange, the king gave them two things: the exclusive right to print the nation's money, and it guaranteed that the loan would be paid back through taxes on the public. This was the moment the modern financial system was born. It was a perfect wealth transfer machine. The wealthy bankers got risk-free interest payments. The king got his war money. And who paid for it all? The common people, taxed on their beer, their salt, and their labor. This system cemented the relationship between the state and the financial elite. It created a bond market where the government could borrow indefinitely, passing the bill to future generations. When you hear politicians today talk about the national debt, remember 1694. That debt isn't just a number. It represents future taxes that haven't been collected yet. It is a claim on your future labor and the labor of your children. Fast forward to the 21st century. The tricks have become so complex that they are buried under thousands of pages of regulations. But the ethos is unchanged. Take the 2008 financial crisis. Banks gambled wildly with money they didn't have, leveraging themselves to the hilt on toxic mortgage assets. When the house of cards collapsed, capitalism dictated that they should have failed. Bad decisions should lead to bankruptcy. That is how a healthy market cleans itself. But that didn't happen. Instead, governments stepped in with bailouts. They took trillions of dollars of public money, taxpayer money, and plugged the holes in the bank's balance sheets. The narrative sold to the public was fear. If we don't save them, the ATMs will stop working and society will collapse. The reality was a massive transfer of wealth. The bankers who caused the crash kept their bonuses. The institutions became bigger and more powerful. Meanwhile, the average citizen faced years of austerity, stagnant wages, and high unemployment. This is the ultimate modern trick. Privatize the gains, socialize the losses. When the elite win, they keep the profit. When they lose, you pay the bill. Perhaps the most heartbreaking trick of all involves the promise of retirement. In the mid-20th century, governments across the West set up state pension systems. The deal was simple. You pay a portion of your paycheck now, and the government invests it to care for you when you are old. Most people believe there is a lockbox somewhere with their name on it, holding all the money they've contributed. This is a lie. There is no lockbox. In almost every major economy, state pensions are pazugo. The money you pay in taxes today is immediately spent to pay current retirees, or worse, diverted to other government spending. This works fine as long as the population is growing and there are more young workers than old retirees. It has all the structural characteristics of a Ponzi scheme. It requires a constant influx of new investors, young workers, to pay off the old ones. But now, the demographics have turned. Populations are aging. The worker-to-retiree ratio is collapsing. The government knows the math doesn't work. They know they cannot pay what they promised. So, what do? They don't admit the fraud. They simply change the rules. They raise the retirement age. They change the formula for inflation adjustments. They make you work longer for less. They broke the contract, but because they write the laws, you have no recourse. Why do we let this happen? Why aren't people marching in the streets? The answer lies in the final trick, the weaponization of complexity. In Rome, you could feel the copper in the coin. It was tangible. Today, financial theft happens through quantitative easing, yield curve control, and derivatives. The language is designed to be boring and impenetrable. When the central bank prints $1 trillion to buy government bonds, they call it providing liquidity. It sounds benign, helpful even, but in reality, it is flooding the market with new money, which dilutes the value of the money you worked for. It drives up the price of assets like stocks and real estate, which are owned mostly by the rich, while making rent and groceries more expensive for everyone else. They have made the system so complicated that the average person tunes out. You assume that the experts know what they are doing, but the complexity is just camouflage. It hides the simple truth that wealth is being funneled upwards. Conclusion: waking up the history of government finance is not a history of benevolence. It is a history of survival for the state at the expense of the citizen. From the debased denarius of Rome to the bailouts of Wall Street, the mechanism remains the same. The government spends more than it has. It covers the gap by creating money or debt. The resulting inflation and interest payments are borne by the working and middle classes. So, what can you do? The first step is to stop being naive about the system. Understand that when a politician promises you free money or new programs, the bill will arrive eventually, likely in the form of inflation. Stop storing your life's energy in a currency that is programmed to lose value. True financial freedom comes from owning real assets, things that cannot be printed by a central bank. It comes from education. It comes from realizing that the system isn't broken. It was built this way. And now that you see the tricks, you can finally start playing the game by your own rules.